I'm Maya, a 35-year-old software engineer who spent 4 years building cutting-edge technology for TechFusion Incorporated. After developing a revolutionary algorithm that could save the company millions, I asked for a modest raise. Instead, I was humiliated in a meeting with the director's wife, who ran HR. "Be thankful you have a job," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. Little did they know, her condescension would spark the most calculated move of my career. If you're watching this from your cubicle, dreaming of your own corporate checkmate, hit like and subscribe. Let me show you how I turned their dismissal into my greatest victory. My journey with TechFusion started long before that fateful meeting. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Minneapolis, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. From a young age, I had a knack for math and computer science, spending weekends coding small programs while other kids played outside. My parents supported me, but their resources were limited. I graduated at the top of my class from the University of Minnesota with a degree in computer science, but the achievement came with nearly $150,000 in student debt. While classmates with wealthy parents celebrated debt-free, I was calculating how long it would take to pay off loans on an entry-level salary. TechFusion wasn't my dream company. I had barely heard of them when I applied. They were a mid-size tech firm specializing in data processing for healthcare and finance. What they lacked in prestige, they made up for with a starting salary that would help me tackle my debt. I joined as an entry-level programmer, dreaming that one day my innovations would be noticed and rewarded. The company culture hit me like a cold shower on day one. The office buzzed with political maneuvering rather than real innovation. People spent more time managing perceptions than writing code. But I made a conscious choice to focus on my work and let the results speak for themselves. How naive I was. Several key players dominated the hierarchy. At the top was James Daniels, director and CEO. James had an MBA from Wharton but limited technical knowledge. His real talent? Marrying Brittany Williams, the founder's daughter, which fast-tracked his rise. He strutted around the office in tailored suits, spouting business jargon and taking credit for the company's successes. His wife, Brittany Daniels, ran HR despite having no qualifications beyond a bachelor's in communications. She wielded her power like an expensive perfume, suffocating anyone who dared challenge her authority. Hiring and pay decisions were based on personal loyalty, creating a web that protected her and James. My direct supervisor, John Weber, was one of the few genuinely kind people at TechFusion. A brilliant programmer himself, he recognized my potential and gave me increasingly complex projects. But John lacked political savvy. Passed over for promotion multiple times, he had the title, but not the authority to truly advocate for his team. Then there was Alex Morrison, my colleague who excelled at one thing, taking credit for other people's work. Alex was tight with James, joining him for golf and drinks after work. His technical skills were mediocre, but his self-promotion was unmatched. The company lawyer, Samuel Thompson, rarely appeared at meetings. With his rumpled suits and quiet demeanor, most employees underestimated him. I would later learn that behind that calm exterior was one of the sharpest minds in corporate law. My big break came 2 years in. Healthcare data processing was bottlenecked, costing clients millions. The senior development team had tried everything without success. During a late-night coding session, I had a breakthrough. A parallel processing approach that could solve the issue. For 6 months, I worked relentlessly. Mornings, nights, weekends, holidays. I even missed my sister's wedding reception, obsessed with solving a critical component. My apartment became a shrine to the project, whiteboards covering every wall, coffee cups forming a caffeine archaeological record of my obsession. The algorithm I developed was revolutionary. It cut processing time by 87% while increasing accuracy by 34%. For healthcare clients, that meant faster patient care and millions in savings. For finance clients, real-time transaction analysis that prevented fraud and optimized investments. When I finally presented it to the executive team, the room went silent. James was the first to recover. Seeing the profit potential, he announced, as if he'd guided the work himself, "This is exactly the kind of innovation Tech Fusion stands for." I noticed Alex scowling in the corner, for once, unable to claim credit for a major breakthrough. As my algorithm rolled out and clients raved about the results, my male colleagues were handed bonuses and promotions for supporting roles in the project. Meanwhile, my salary stayed stagnant, barely making a dent in my student loans. A quick look at industry standards revealed the truth. I was being paid 30% below market rate for my role and contributions. What the executives didn't know was that I had meticulously documented every step of my work, every breakthrough, every line of code, every test result, securely stored at work and backed up at home. Something in my gut told me that documentation would matter someday. I just had no idea how much. After watching Tech Fusion profit massively from my algorithm for 6 months, I decided it was time to demand fair compensation. I prepared meticulously, gathering industry salary data, documenting the revenue my innovation had generated, and rehearsing my pitch in front of the bathroom mirror until I could deliver it with confidence and zero apology. John, my supervisor, supported me but warned me about the politics. "You deserve twice what you're asking for," he said, "but be ready for pushback. They don't like anyone upsetting the status quo here." With his endorsement, I scheduled a meeting with Brittany Daniels in HR. On the day of, I wore my sharpest outfit, a navy blue pantsuit I'd splurged on for important occasions, and arrived 10 minutes early, clutching my folder of evidence. Brittany made me wait 45 minutes past our scheduled time, a power move I recognized but endured. Her office exuded expensive minimalism, a glass desk likely worth 3 months of my salary. When I finally entered, she didn't look up. "Take a seat, Maya. I'll be with you in a moment." 5 minutes passed before she even acknowledged me again. Finally, closing her laptop with manicured fingers, she said, "John tells me, you want more money?" The tone made my carefully researched request sound like childish greed. I launched into my presentation, explaining how my algorithm had transformed the company's offerings and boosted revenue. I showed charts comparing my current salary to market rates, outlined my continued value, and shared plans for future improvements. Brittany's expression never wavered. When I finished, she glanced at her watch. "Are you done?" she asked, barely glancing at the documents I'd placed on her desk. When I nodded, she delivered the response that would change everything. "Maya, we appreciate your contributions, but everyone at Tech Fusion works hard. Your algorithm was built using company resources, on company time, for company clients. That is literally what we pay you to do." My heart sank, but I pressed on. "I understand that, but my current compensation is far below market, especially considering the revenue this contribution has generated." The algorithm increased quarterly revenue by 22%. Brittany's perfectly lined lips curved into a smile. Technically a smile, but devoid of warmth. "In this economy, Maya, you should be grateful you have a job. Many qualified people would be happy to take your position if you're unhappy here." The threat hung in the air. I took a deep breath. "Has my request been reviewed by James or the executive team?" Something flashed in her eyes. "I make preliminary decisions on compensation. Your request did not warrant escalation to my husband or the board. The decision is final." In that moment, I realized my request had never been seriously considered. Brittany had unilaterally decided I didn't deserve recognition or fair pay, and her relationship with James guaranteed that decision would stand. "Is there anything else?" she asked, already reaching for her laptop. "No," I said quietly. "Thank you for your time." Walking back to my desk felt like the longest journey of my life. Colleagues glanced up, quickly looking away when they saw my expression. I kept my head high, face neutral. But inside, I was crumbling. Just as I sat down, I heard Alex's voice from the break room, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just got my quarterly bonus," he boasted. "James said my contributions to the new algorithm made all the difference, paying for my Aspen ski trip next month." My hands trembled as I unlocked my computer. Alex had attended exactly 2 meetings about my algorithm, both times playing games on his phone, and now he was being rewarded for my work. I opened my banking app. My student loan balance still hovered around $90,000. Tears came without warning. I rushed to the bathroom, locking myself in the last stall. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to muffle the sobs tearing through my chest. Everything I had been taught about hard work being rewarded felt like a cruel joke. I gave myself exactly 10 minutes to break down, then splashed cold water on my face and returned to my desk. Something inside me had shifted. The loyal, hopeful employee who had walked into Brittany's office no longer existed. In her place was someone new, someone who understood that in this environment I had to advocate for myself, because no one else would. "Are you okay?" John asked quietly later that afternoon, stopping by my desk. "I will be," I replied, and for the first time that day, I felt a spark of truth in my words. I would be okay, but Tech Fusion might not. 2 weeks after that disastrous meeting, I found myself alone in the office at 11:30 p.m. The cleaning staff had gone, leaving behind the sharp scent of industrial disinfectant. I had been staying late regularly, partly to avoid Alex, partly to rethink my entire career path. Out of frustration and curiosity, I pulled up my original employment contract. I had signed it eagerly 4 years earlier, barely reading the fine print in my rush to start paying off student loans. Now, I scrutinized every clause, looking for leverage, or at least a graceful exit. On page 17, buried in dense legal language about intellectual property, something caught my eye. The standard clause stated that any inventions or developments conceived during employment belonged to the company. But there was a specific exception. Innovations developed without using company equipment, supplies, facilities, or trade secrets, developed entirely on the employee's own time, not directly related to the company's business or anticipated research. At first, I felt disappointed. My algorithm seemed squarely within the company's ownership. But then I remembered something crucial. The core mathematical model that made my algorithm revolutionary had been developed long before I joined Tech Fusion, 3 years earlier, as part of my graduate thesis. It was purely academic, without practical application. I had never published it formally because I rushed into the workforce to pay off my loans. University policy clearly stated that unpublished student work remained the intellectual property of the student. I had adapted this model to build the algorithm for Tech Fusion. The company owned the implementation and application, but the foundational innovation, the part that made it work, might still legally belong to me. My heart raced on the drive home. The next morning, I called several patent attorneys before finding Patricia Reynolds, a specialist in software intellectual property disputes. I paid her consultation fee from my meager savings and explained the situation. Patricia listened carefully, asking pointed questions about the algorithm, my thesis, and my employment contract. After reviewing the documents, she leaned back, thoughtful. "There is something here," she said. "The core mathematical model is distinct from the implementation. Based on your documentation and timing, you have a strong claim to the intellectual foundation of this technology. What does that mean practically?" I asked, trying to temper the hope rising inside me. "It means you could potentially file patents on the core technology and license it, including to your current employer," Patricia explained. "It's complex and will require thorough documentation, but it's not unprecedented." Over the next few weeks, I built my case meticulously. I recovered my graduate thesis and notes, documented how the original model evolved into Tech Fusion's algorithm, and worked with Patricia to define the line between my intellectual property and the company's. The plan that emerged was both terrifying and exhilarating. I would file patents on the core model as my own intellectual property. Once secured, I would form an LLC to handle licensing, including to TechFusion if they wanted to continue using it. If they refused, I could license it to competitors. The risks were enormous. I could lose my job. I might be blacklisted. TechFusion had far more legal resources than I did. But the rewards, financial independence, recognition for my work, and forcing the company to acknowledge my value were worth it. Emotionally, it was a roller coaster. Some days I felt powerful and righteous, convinced I was taking a necessary stand. Other days I was paralyzed with fear, wondering if I was committing career suicide. My sister, the only person I confided in, reminded me that I had nothing to lose but an undervalued position at a company that didn't respect me. I worked methodically, using only my personal laptop and home internet. I gathered evidence from my personal archives, university records, and legally obtained company documents, showing the clear connection between my thesis and TechFusion's current technology. I established Parallax Solutions LLC, a bland-sounding entity to hold my intellectual property. I opened a separate bank account and ensured all legal structures were in place for what might come next. The hardest part was maintaining a normal facade at work. I continued excelling at my duties, improving the algorithm's implementation, smiling through meetings with Alex, nodding politely to James, and greeting Brittany when paths crossed, all while preparing for what my sister called the nuclear option. The thought of an all-out legal battle terrified me. But every time I received another inadequate paycheck or heard Alex take credit for my work, my resolve strengthened. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Patricia asked during one meeting. "Once we file the patents, there's no going back." I nodded. I had made my choice. I thought about Brittany's dismissive wave, James exploiting my talent, and Alex cashing in on my work. I thought about my student loans and the apartment I could barely afford despite creating technology worth millions. I was certain they had their chance to do the right thing. With Patricia's guidance, I filed patent applications for the core mathematical model behind my algorithm. We crafted them carefully to cover the foundational innovation without infringing on TechFusion's implementation. The process drained my savings, but Patricia assured me it was an investment worth making. While waiting for patent review, I created comprehensive documentation of my work. I organized my graduate thesis, early sketches, and progress notes, showing how the core model evolved into its current form. I included timestamps, witnesses from my university days, and clear distinctions between my original concept and TechFusion's implementation. I enlisted the help of my former advisor, Professor Jameson, who provided a written statement confirming that I had developed the mathematical foundation years before joining TechFusion. Having a respected expert testify added significant credibility. At work, I took calculated steps to strengthen my position. I casually referenced the origins of my algorithm in conversations with trusted colleagues, subtly establishing witnesses who could confirm I had always attributed the foundational ideas to my academic work. I never revealed my plans, but I created a record of consistent attribution. Meanwhile, TechFusion was preparing a major product launch, a new healthcare analytics platform centered entirely around my algorithm. Marketing materials described it as proprietary technology that would revolutionize patient care. Each glimpse of these materials fueled my resolve. 4 months after filing, I received preliminary approval for my patents. Patricia warned that final approval could take longer, but the preliminary status gave us enough legal standing to proceed. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. TechFusion had just announced record quarterly profits, and during the all-hands meeting, James proudly attributed the success to our proprietary technology, glancing at Alex rather than me. I sat quietly, knowing the definition of proprietary was about to be challenged. I scheduled a meeting with John for Monday morning. Over the weekend, I prepared my resignation letter and organized my files for a clean handover. I slept poorly, oscillating between anxiety and determination. "You wanted to see me?" John asked, concern on his face. "I am resigning effective 2 weeks from today," I said, sliding the letter across the table. John looked genuinely shocked. Maya, is this because of the raise? We could appeal to James directly. I shook my head. My decision is final. I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. You've been a great mentor. Where are you going? He asked, concern clear in his voice. I'm pursuing an independent venture, I said carefully. I'll be working with my own intellectual property. John's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't press further. We'll miss you tremendously. The team won't be the same, he said. As I walked back to my desk, a strange lightness filled me. After 4 years of pouring my talent and time into Tech Fusion with inadequate recognition, I was finally taking control of my professional destiny. During my 2-week notice, I meticulously documented all projects, trained colleagues on system maintenance, and ensured a smooth transition. I maintained a professional demeanor, giving no hint of the storm that was about to break. On my last day, a small gathering featured cupcakes from a local bakery. Colleagues expressed surprise at my departure and asked vague questions, which I answered with equally vague responses about exploring new opportunities. James didn't attend, and Brittany stopped by only long enough to remind me about my confidentiality obligations. As I packed my belongings into a cardboard box, John approached me one last time. Whatever you're planning, Maya, I hope it works out. You deserve better than what happened here. I smiled at him, touched. Thank you, John. I have a feeling things are going to work out exactly as they should. The following Monday, exactly 1 week after my departure, Patricia sent the first formal letter to Tech Fusion's legal department. It stated simply that Tech Fusion was using patented technology belonging to me, licensed through Parallax Solutions LLC, and invited them to discuss licensing arrangements. The letter was non-confrontational, presenting the situation as a straightforward business matter rather than an accusation, a strategy Patricia had recommended to encourage negotiation over hostility. 3 days passed. No response. Then my phone rang, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Is this Maya? James's voice was tight, controlled, anger barely restrained. Yes, I replied calmly. What kind of game are you playing? He demanded. Our legal team says you're claiming ownership of company technology. Not company technology, I corrected. The mathematical model I developed during graduate school, 3 years before I joined Tech Fusion. Your legal team has received documentation proving this. The algorithm I implemented at Tech Fusion was based on my pre-existing intellectual property, he nearly shouted. You developed the algorithm while working for us. I implemented an application based on my model, I clarified. But the core innovation, the patented mathematical model itself, remains mine. A creative string of expletives followed, but unproductive. I waited until he ran out of steam. This conversation would be more constructive between our legal representatives, I suggested. You will never work in this industry again, he threatened, then hung up. An hour later, Brittany called, delivering a similar message in her icy, detached tone. I always knew you were ungrateful, but I never took you for stupid, she sneered. Do you really think you can take on Tech Fusion's legal team with whatever bargain basement lawyer you found? I think intellectual property law is fairly clear on this matter, I replied calmly. But again, I prefer these discussions happen through proper channels. $20,000, she said abruptly. We will pay you $20,000 to go away and drop this nonsense. The offer barely covered my patent filing costs. Please have your legal team contact Patricia Reynolds regarding any settlement offers, I said, ending the call. The following day, Tech Fusion sent their first formal move, a cease and desist claiming my patent applications were theft of corporate property. Patricia assured me it was standard intimidation and filed our response with the comprehensive evidence package we had prepared. And so began the chess game, moves and counter-moves, each step bringing me closer to the endgame I had been planning. For 2 weeks after leaving Tech Fusion, a tense standoff ensued. Their legal department sent increasingly stern letters. Patricia responded calmly, backed by evidence. Behind the scenes, I knew they were scrambling to assess their vulnerability. Their initial dismissiveness shifted to concern when Patricia sent University of Minnesota documentation confirming the dates of my graduate research. Subtle, but noticeable, their tone softened, culminating in a request for a good-faith discussion to resolve the situation. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating in the industry. A former colleague texted, "People are saying you're suing TechFusion." I neither confirmed nor denied it, replying only that I was addressing some intellectual property matters. The ambiguity fueled speculation. James called again, this time with a different approach. "Maya, surely we can work this out reasonably," he said, voice artificially pleasant. "You are a valued team member. This seems like a misunderstanding." "I agree, it's unfortunate," I replied. "I previously tried to communicate my value and was told to be thankful. I had a job." The silence that followed told me he hadn't been briefed on my meeting with Brittany. "Let's put that aside," he continued smoothly. "We are prepared to offer you a consulting position at double your previous salary, plus a one-time $50,000 signing bonus. In exchange, you would transfer any patent rights to TechFusion." The offer was better than my former compensation, but still drastically undervalued the technology. More importantly, it confirmed Patricia's prediction. They were worried. "Thank you for the offer," I said. "I will discuss it with my attorney." Patricia's response was exactly what I expected. "They're getting nervous but still trying to lowball you. The technology could be worth millions in licensing fees. Stay the course." TechFusion's next move came from Samuel Thompson, their usually quiet company lawyer. He requested a private meeting with Patricia, without other representatives present, an unusual step suggesting internal disagreement. Patricia reported back that Samuel had been candid. "They have a problem," she said. "The entire healthcare platform is built on your algorithm. They have contracts with major hospital systems ready to sign, and their technical team confirmed they cannot replace your core model without major delays and performance loss." My breath caught. "What did he offer?" I asked. $300,000 and a non-disclosure agreement, Patricia said. Still far below fair value, but they were moving in the right direction. We declined while remaining open to negotiation. I took another calculated risk. I reached out to several of TechFusion's competitors, hinting that revolutionary data processing technology would soon be available for licensing. I never explicitly named the technology behind TechFusion's success, but the implication was clear. Word got back to TechFusion quickly. James left a voicemail, barely controlling his rage. "We've heard you're approaching our competitors. This breaches your non-compete and will result in immediate legal action if you continue," Patricia reassured me. "Your non-compete covers applications and implementations you developed at TechFusion, not the underlying mathematical model that predates your employment. Their lawyers know this. That's why they haven't filed anything yet." The pressure continued to build. I received LinkedIn messages from former colleagues, some offering support, others fishing for information for management. But I stayed calm. Every move was part of the plan. John sent me a brief text. "Whatever is happening with you and TechFusion, James is in closed-door meetings all day. Stay strong." 3 weeks after my resignation, TechFusion made another offer. $1 million for complete transfer of all patent rights. It was a substantial sum, enough to eliminate my student debt and give financial security, but still far below the technology's true value, considering its central role in their business. After careful consideration and consultation with Patricia, I declined again. Instead, we sent our first concrete proposal, a licensing agreement that would allow TechFusion continued use of my technology. With an initial payment of $2 million plus ongoing royalties based on revenues from products utilizing the technology. Their response was swift and hostile. Their legal team sent a formal notice, claiming my patent applications constituted theft of corporate property and suggested I had misappropriated company resources. They demanded an immediate in-person meeting. "They're escalating because they're running out of time," Patricia observed. TechFusion's product launch was scheduled for next month, and they couldn't proceed with this uncertainty hanging over them. The meeting was set for the following week at Patricia's office. As the date approached, I oscillated between confidence and terror. The night before, I barely slept, rehearsing scenarios and responses. The morning of the meeting, I dressed in a new charcoal gray suit, a subtle armor for the battle ahead. Patricia arrived an hour early to review our strategy one final time. "Let me do most of the talking," she advised. "If they address you directly, be factual and unemotional. They may try to provoke you to undermine your credibility." At precisely 10 hours, the Tech Fusion team arrived. James, Brittany, Samuel Thompson, and 2 external attorneys. James looked surprised to see me there, perhaps expecting to intimidate Patricia without my presence. As they settled around the table, a strange calm replaced my anxiety. I had truth and evidence on my side. I had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. The conference room felt too small for the tension it held. James sat directly across from me, his expensive suit and polished appearance contrasting with the dark circles under his eyes. Brittany was beside him, her face a mask of icy professionalism. Samuel and the external attorneys flanked them, forming a wall of legal power meant to intimidate. Patricia opened the meeting with practiced ease. "Thank you all for coming. I believe we can reach a resolution that serves everyone's interests if we approach this discussion in good faith." One of the external attorneys, a gray-haired man named William Porter, spoke first. "Let me be clear. Miss Stevens was a Tech Fusion employee when she developed the algorithm in question. Any intellectual property created during employment belongs exclusively to the company under her contract." Patricia smiled slightly. "That would be true if the intellectual property had originated during her employment. However, as our documentation conclusively shows, the core mathematical model was developed 3 years prior to Miss Stevens joining Tech Fusion as part of her graduate studies at the University of Minnesota. She opened a folder and distributed copies of my thesis, early development notes, and the university's intellectual property policy regarding unpublished student work. You will note the dates on these documents, all authenticated." James waved dismissively. She adapted and expanded some academic exercise she did in college while working for us. "The commercially viable technology belongs to Tech Fusion," Patricia countered, calm and precise. Miss Stevens adapted her original innovation for Tech Fusion's specific use case. The core mathematical model, which she has patented, remains her intellectual property. Tech Fusion owns the implementation built around the model, but not the model itself. I noticed Samuel Thompson studying the documents with more care than his colleagues. His expression shifted subtly as he read the university's certification of my work dates. Brittany spoke for the first time, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is absurd. Maya was a mid-level programmer on an important project. Now she's trying to extort the company over a raise she didn't deserve." Patricia had prepared me for this. "Your client's compensation history and performance reviews are not relevant to the intellectual property question," she said firmly. "The only relevant facts are the origin and ownership of the patented technology, which the documentation clearly establishes." Porter leaned forward. "Even if we were to accept your premise about the model's origin, which we do not, Miss Stevens implemented it while employed at Tech Fusion, using company resources and time. That implementation is unquestionably company property." "Absolutely," Patricia agreed, surprising them. "Tech Fusion owns the specific implementation. However, that implementation relies entirely on my client's patented mathematical model. Without a license to use it, the implementation is unusable." The implications hung in the air. Their entire healthcare analytics platform, scheduled to launch in 3 weeks, would be dead in the water. James's face flushed with anger. "This is a shakedown. Your client is holding this company hostage over a personal grievance." "On the contrary," Patricia replied calmly, "my client is exercising her legal rights as the creator and owner of valuable intellectual property. She is prepared to offer Tech Fusion a licensing agreement for continued use under fair terms." "What terms?" Samuel asked, finally speaking. Patricia slid a document across the table. "A licensing fee of $99,000 per day for any Tech Fusion product or service using the patented technology." The room fell silent. The chessboard had been set, and checkmate was within reach. The number was strategically chosen. $36 million annually. Roughly 15% of TechFusion's revenue from products using my algorithm, in line with industry standards for critical technology licensing. James laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. This is delusional. We will not pay a former employee $36 million a year for work she did while on our payroll. Patricia remained calm. The alternative, she said, would be to stop using the technology entirely and develop a replacement. That would delay your product launch and likely result in inferior performance metrics. Brittany whispered something to James, who scowled. "This meeting is a waste of time," he barked, standing abruptly. "We'll see you in court, where this ridiculous patent claim will be invalidated." Patricia's expression didn't change. Litigation would be public, expensive, and time-consuming. Until resolved, TechFusion would legally be prohibited from using the disputed technology. Samuel Thompson placed a restraining hand on James's arm. "Perhaps we should consider all options before committing to litigation," he suggested quietly. "This is blackmail, plain and simple," James snapped. "Who does she think she is? Who actually owns this tech? The company paid for its development." Patricia gave me a subtle nod, the signal we had rehearsed. It was my turn. "I own the technology, James," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I developed the core mathematical model during graduate school, years before I ever heard of TechFusion. I have the documentation, the witnesses, and the patents to prove it." Patricia turned her laptop to face the TechFusion team. On the screen was a financial analysis from an independent consultant, showing the projected impact on TechFusion stock if their product launch was delayed or canceled due to intellectual property disputes. "This is what your shareholders stand to lose if we cannot reach an agreement today," Patricia explained. "Additionally, once this dispute becomes public, competitors will certainly be interested in licensing this technology." The room went silent. The numbers were devastating. TechFusion had invested heavily in the new platform, and failure to launch would likely trigger shareholder lawsuits on top of the patent dispute. Samuel Thompson was the first to recover. "I believe we should discuss this privately before proceeding," he said to James. For 30 minutes, the TechFusion team huddled in a separate conference room while Patricia and I waited. When they returned, the dynamic had shifted. Samuel took the lead, while James remained uncharacteristically quiet. "We are prepared to discuss a licensing arrangement," Samuel announced. "However, your proposed terms are excessive. We would consider a flat annual fee of $5 million plus a 2% royalty on products directly utilizing the technology." Patricia and I had already agreed on our minimum, $10 million annually, plus 5% royalties, with a 5-year guaranteed term. Negotiations went on for 2 more hours, proposals and counter-proposals flying across the table. I maintained my composure, speaking only when addressed and deferring to Patricia on legal matters. Inside, I oscillated between disbelief that it was actually working and fierce pride in standing my ground. By late afternoon, we reached an agreement in principle. TechFusion would pay an initial licensing fee of $12 million, followed by annual payments of $8 million plus 3% royalties on all products using my technology. The contract would run 7 years with renewal options, and I would be credited as the inventor in all relevant patents and marketing materials. As the TechFusion team prepared to leave, James finally addressed me directly. "I hope you're satisfied," he said, bitterness in his voice. I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not satisfied, James. I am fairly compensated. That's all I ever wanted." After they left, Patricia turned to me with a broad smile. "Congratulations, Maya. You just won your corporate checkmate." The reality washed over me. Years of being undervalued, overlooked, and dismissed had led to this moment. I hadn't pleaded. I hadn't gamed office politics. I had prepared, believed in myself, and refused to be ignored. As I stepped into the cool autumn air outside Patricia's office, the liberation I felt transcended money. I had reclaimed my intellectual property, and my professional dignity. The following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, financial arrangements, and life changes. Patricia and her team finalized the licensing agreement, scrutinizing every clause to protect my interests. TechFusion tried to insert restrictive conditions at the last minute, but Patricia held firm. By the end of November, my bank account reflected the first $12 million payment. The number was surreal. I checked it multiple times just to believe it. My first action: paying off my student loans in full. After 4 years of watching that number shrink painfully slowly each month, erasing the debt in a single transaction felt like removing chains I hadn't realized I'd been wearing. TechFusion proceeded with their product launch, now legally using my technology under the licensing agreement. Their press release included the required acknowledgement of me as the creator of the core mathematical model buried in the third paragraph. Still, industry publications noticed. Questions arose. Who was the unknown female mathematician behind TechFusion's breakthrough technology? When a prominent tech journal requested an interview, I consulted with Patricia before accepting. We agreed I would focus on the technical aspects of my work while avoiding details of the licensing dispute. The resulting article, The Algorithm Queen: How Maya Stevens Revolutionized Data Processing, finally gave me the professional recognition I had been denied for years. It caught the attention of venture capitalists curious about what I might develop next. 3 months after leaving TechFusion, I founded Stevens Innovations, using seed funding to assemble a small team of brilliant programmers who, like me, had been undervalued at previous employers. Our compensation structure reflected a simple principle: innovation should always be rewarded fairly. Inside TechFusion, my departure and the licensing agreement triggered a shakeup. 2 board members, concerned about executive mismanagement of intellectual property, launched an internal investigation. Their findings revealed Brittany had repeatedly rejected fair compensation requests from valuable employees, leading to a pattern of talent loss. John, my former supervisor, emailed me 6 months after I left. James has been effectively demoted. He still holds the director title, but the board brought in a new CTO who now makes all technical decisions. Brittany resigned to spend more time with family last week. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't respond with the glee I might have felt initially. By then, I had moved beyond the need for vindication, focused on building something meaningful. I realized the best revenge wasn't witnessing their fall. It was thriving despite their attempts to limit me. Healing from the emotional impact took longer than resolving the legal and financial aspects. For months, I experienced anxiety attacks checking email, fearing a new legal threat. I had nightmares about being back in Brittany's office, hearing that I was worthless. Therapy helped me process these reactions, teaching me tools to reclaim my professional self-worth. Gradually, the raw emotions faded. The anger that fueled my initial planning transformed into determination to create a different kind of workplace culture. At Stevens Innovations, we implemented transparent salary bands, clear paths for advancement and profit sharing, ensuring everyone benefited from the company's success. 2 years after leaving TechFusion, at a major tech conference in San Francisco, I ran into John in the exhibition hall. He had finally left TechFusion to join a startup focused on educational technology. "You look different," he observed. "I feel different," I admitted. "Running my own company has changed my perspective on a lot of things." "You inspired others," John said. "After what happened with you, several people at TechFusion started questioning their compensation and intellectual property arrangements. The company had to make policy changes. That conversation was unexpectedly healing. Knowing my stand had created positive change for others gave purpose to the difficult journey I had undertaken. Not everything was perfect. Building Stevens Innovations came with sleepless nights and setbacks. Some former colleagues viewed my actions as betrayal. A few industry players, friends of James, subtly blocked potential partnerships. But for every closed door, 3 new ones opened. My reputation for innovation and fair business practices began to spread. Looking back, Brittany's dismissive, "Be thankful you have a job" comment became the catalyst for a transformation far beyond my professional life. It forced me to confront my own complicity in accepting undercompensation, to recognize my true value, and to develop the courage to advocate for myself. The most profound lesson I learned: knowing your worth and ensuring others recognize it is not selfishness, it's self-respect. When we allow ourselves to be undervalued, we enable systems that exploit talent rather than nurture it. By standing firm in my value, I changed not only my own circumstances, but contributed to reshaping an industry culture that too often takes advantage of dedicated, passionate people. Sometimes the greatest success comes after the most painful rejection. Moments of humiliation can become the foundation for triumph if we refuse to accept others' limited assessment of our worth. True power comes not from titles or authority, but from the courage to stand in your truth, even when standing alone. Have you ever been undervalued in your workplace? What steps did you take to advocate for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about turning professional setbacks into stepping stones for success. Remember, your worth is not determined by others' recognition, but by knowing your own value and having the courage to stand up for it. Thank you for watching. I hope my story inspires you to claim your true value wherever your career takes you.